Well, hey, right then. So now this is part two of an introduction to the Battle of Malaya and 4C, and this is the Counter-Factual. My plan. We can all be very, very afraid now. Me planning how to fight a war. Yeah, to be fair, as a naval historian, you have to do that. You do this quite often, mainly to try and figure out what you're missing in the research. Bilge pumps, yay! You hear a lot about how to fight wars in bilge pumps, and a lot about discussions about what we're currently building and what's currently going on in the world, and why we really should be doing something slightly differently, and what we're doing quite well, and why we are making ships which look like Cylons and stormtroopers. Oh my, seriously. I'm not sure what's happened to the German Navy in the recent years. They used to produce some very beautiful looking ships. Now I don't know what's happened to them. Right, so here are the criteria used, just in case you feel like putting your own thoughts together. And we'll put this in the same, if you want to, in the same Discord as we've got the fleet options going on. The criteria is that I arrive on the 1st of April 1941 as a Supreme Commander, Commonwealth Forces Far East. So have control over all naval and land forces within that region. The forces available at the beginning are the same and will not have anything new brought into the theatre. Okay? So I'm not allowed to go, an HMS War Sprite, an HMS, I don't know, Victorious, an HMS this, an HMS that all appear, and I suddenly have a crack guards armored division and all those things, or an entire division of Gurkhas. Things I could do with an entire division of Gurkhas. Japanese 25th Army would go home crying with an entire division of Gurkhas. It would. Let's be honest. The Japanese are formidable soldiers, but inside the division of Gurkhas, I'm sorry, they're Gurkhas. Simulation lasts till the 28th, February 28th, 1942. Okay. So I can move personnel around within the scenario, but I can't really chop and change and fire in them. And the reason it ends in February is because after February is when sort of things go really weird. You've got the fall of Singapore and all these things happen, and then lots of things are happening afterwards. And the thing is, if Singapore hasn't fallen, then a lot of what happens after February 1942 might not happen that way. Because of course Singapore doesn't fall in my plan, because it's my plan, and my plan is brilliant. But I am both beloved by both Winston Churchill and John Curtin. This is important. I have both the British Prime Minister and the Australian Prime Minister on my side. They both love me and think I am amazing. Most of all, I cannot entertain any advanced knowledge of how the enemy will attack. So I don't know where the enemy are going to come. This is the point. I have to be designing my plan without knowing where the enemy are going to attack from. So here's the thing I thought was, well, should it be me or should I be someone else when I'm thinking about who this is? And I thought it'd be far more realistic if I was someone from the time period who would fit those criteria, i.e., beloved by both Churchill and John Curtin, and would likely potentially be given these positions. Well, you have Admiral Sir Percy Noble, who's the former commander of CNC China Station. A very nice consensus leading admiral. He is now currently at this point. He is back in the UK running the preparations that are dealing with the Battle of the Atlantic. So he's quite involved there. And he's proving bloody good actually, because he's the French. So I doubt he'd be called out. Then you have Admiral Sir Andrew Cunningham, both like him. Trouble is, he's kind of fighting the Battle of the Mediterranean. Pesky Italians are causing issues again. Not only do the Italians cause issues with resupplying Singapore, they're also sapping up one of the best commanders available for it. It's terrible. However, there is a final option. Admiral of the Fleet, Sir Roger Keyes. He's been a Prime Minister, member of the House of Lords. not a Prime Minister. He's been a member of Parliament, a member of the House of Lords. He's very good friends with the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. He's known by John Curtin and trusted by him. He is currently the Commander Combined Operations Command, which means he works with a lot of the Army units as well as the Navy and various other units. He's used to working with different services. And to say he's a powerful personality, well, is the understatement of a century. Why have I picked admirals for this one? A, the Far East is traditionally a naval command, and B, honestly, most of the good generals are very, very committed. And to be honest, the admirals are much better, but there is one option who could be moved, because in October that year, in 1941, he's going to be replaced by Lord Louis Mountbatten anyway. So I thought, frankly, I'd replace him early. And so in April 1941, Admiral Phillips Roger Keyes is sent out to the Far East. It's felt that his, as Supreme Commander, it's felt that his personal status and his knowledge and experience and things will act as a counter to Japanese in the area, that his mere standing, his presence will have an impact on their plans. But also, and this is the most important thing, it's a very good method of sending a very visible statement of intent, of British commitment to the region, to send out such a senior, such an experienced officer. Pretty much, if you send him out, you have a very, very senior officer there, and you have someone who is able to work with the Dutch, with a lot of the allies the British have, with the Americans, the Australians, and you have a very big difference going on. So pretty much Roger Keyes is your only option when you work through it for this potential role. RAF is too new a service. The senior officers aren't really well enough known, so you can't really, outside of the UK, so you can't really take any of them. There are some good officers who would be a candidate in the RAF, but the trouble is it's being known worldwide. And there isn't really enough of an RAF presence to justify them as being a senior officer. The Army, as I said, there's a reason why Percival is sent. There's a reason why he's already short of good senior officers out there. They don't want to send them out there because they don't know if it's going to actually be a war or it's going to be just a peacetime commitment with a little bit of posturing going on, in which case they'd rather have those good officers, NCOs and good units back fighting in North Africa, fighting in the UK and all these sort of things. So, the Army aren't going to start ponying up. So, Roger Keyes. The officer who, when he was first looking at Norway as an option, said, we need to use some old battleships and we need to charge in and take Trondheim, because then we can beat the Germans. So he's prepared to do whatever's necessary to win, and he will work out what to do. He's very active and efficient. He only starts to slow down in 1944 after he gets involved. He is aboard a American landing ship, and it's bombed by the Japanese. So, yeah, that was when he was technically retired. That's how close he was getting to the combat zone. I don't know. I think in 1941, putting him as Supreme Commonwealth Commander with Far East is a suitable command. So, here are the general disposition of forces, as in the new scenario. All forces will do as much training as possible in terms of jungle warfare and artillery control. Naval forces, modern cruisers and submarines are centered on Singapore, with both operating to cover approaches. Prince of Wales and Repulse are at Ceylon, along with every available destroyer. All the cruisers are Indian Ocean convoy escorts. Sloops are deployed to Hong Kong and Singapore. All quickly turned into mine layer form to start seeding some decent minefields to complete approaches to key landing areas. We have the air forces, are basically all brought back to Singapore. It's got 4 big airfields. It's got plenty of space on them. Land forces, as you can see, there is a defensive line I'm now talking about. There are... The heavy units are already moved down there. all sort of things are organized to try and build a proper defense. So let's look at this in detail. So, the risks for this are Japanese intelligence getting wind of the plans. It would need to be buried in lots of different contingencies. So you need to make sure your plans are doing it are going to be buried in a lot of different going to be lots of different options. Oh, we could be doing plan 1, plan 2, plan 3. Great thing about Roger Keyes, he likes to do this. He set up a number of cover operations for what Operation Claymore could be. So if anyone had just managed to get into the files and didn't actually know which one was being done, the same units could be going to multiple different things. It was his standard operating mode, sort of modus operandi, to do this sort of thing. Work on infrastructure will need to be marketed as war work. Well, that's easy enough to do. We're building roads, we're building this, to make it protected. But basically, you can see a line, which is actually a modern road, across Malaysia. That is the line going across to north, and there's also a secondary one you could build down further going into Johor. These areas are the two lines that you could fortify, the defensive lines. Own governments. Yeah, pretty much he would have to spend a lot of his time managing the communications. But again, he's a former member of Parliament. He is a member of the House of Lords. He's used to the politics side. And this is another trouble Percival and, to an extent, Phillips had, was that neither of them was quite as good at managing up as they needed to be for the posts. Phillips needed to be able to go, hang on, this is not a good place for my ships. And Percival needed to go, I can't defend the whole of Malaya. There is no way on earth I can actually do this with the force available. So I have to work out what's important for me to defend and defend that. The thing is, with an active enough senior officer above them, I think those officers could do well because a lot of the problems will be over them. And instead of Percival having to thinking, I am in charge of the whole Malaya, I'm in charge of the land force in Malaya, these are my instructions, I will go deliver them. The Air Force commander, I'm in charge of the Air Force in Malaya, I will go do them. See, Phillips, I'm in charge of the naval forces, I will go do them. And that's it. And you will not move until I tell you to move. So, force available in December. Right then, Border Watch. I have got the Indian 11th Infantry Division providing that. But you'll notice that they have switched units. I have taken the 28th Gurkha Infantry Brigade and I've put them down into the Malaya Commander Reserve. This is in case anyone starts to do anything nasty back to me. The 28th Gurkha Infantry Brigade is one of the better trained units, and I would prefer to have the warfare. I prefer to have them available and under direct command should I need them to react. They've got an armored car unit with them, and they've not got any artillery or engineer and tanks or engineers. They've all been transferred down to the lines of defense. The beach watches, so key beaches, are being watched by independent companies and battalions. Again, these forces are very lightly organized to watch their areas, maybe put up a little initial resistance, but their orders are very much to withdraw and concentrate down to the lines of defense. When the Japanese attack, I want to know where they're attacking from, I want to know where they're coming from, but I don't want those forces to offer a more than a run and hit and run operation. So they're going to be hitting and running. Keep not try and hold anywhere. Just keep doing an ambush and then withdrawing. So the Japanese never get a chance to flank you, never get a chance to outnumber you and outmass you. They just keep losing and keep bleeding their leading units in these constant ambushes. And by the time they're ready to start fighting back, there's nothing there for them to fight anymore. So basically, it's people firing off a few shots and running, just to slow down their pace of advance, mainly. The lines of defense, I've got the Australian 8th Division sitting there. I've got the Indian 9th Division. I would probably have my 3rd Corps commander sitting in the line of defense as its commander and telling them, basically, you will run this. This is now yours, but you have to look after it. You've got anti-aircraft regiments. You've got the Coastal Regiment. with their artillery there on all their formations. You've got the 11th Infantry Division, units from the 11th Infantry Division. You've got the Line of Communications Brigade there, all sort of things in there. And Fortress Singapore has, to an extent, been left much the same. But Ivan Simpson is now Chief Engineer Malaya to the Supreme Commander. And so he's now building defensive lines. And they are going to be really, really big defensive lines, a la Torres Vedras system. We'll get more into that in a little bit. Arriving in Disposition of Forces, arriving January, based on what arrives in January and February, 18th Infantry Division and the 44th Infantry Brigade and the 45th Infantry Brigade would all come into Singapore. And I would probably keep the Indian and the 2 Indian brigades in Singapore itself. And I would slot forward the 18th Infantry Division into the lines of defence, because with them combined with the Australian, the Indian 9th, and hopefully the intact, virtually 11th Division will be a very strong formation to hold that front. They would probably be sort of part of the reserve, but then I would also, with 4 brigades sitting in Singapore, should the Japanese try to go round, Singapore should have enough defences, especially with its, the main problem with its big artillery batteries is that I haven't got any HE for them. I might have managed as Supreme Commander to get more high explosive for them, but if I haven't, they've got plenty of armor piercing, so anyone wants to come round and do an amphibious assault on Singapore, they're going to be having fun. So, that should keep that back. And, of course, I have got the Gurkhas also there as ready reserve to surge where I need them to go. So, technically, I would have 5 brigades sitting on Singapore. I would probably actually start forming up the 28th, the 44th, and the 45th into another division, so that would be my reserve division that I could use for the defense of Singapore or surge where I needed to go. And those scenarios that the Japanese try and get around me, don't attack my lines like I want them to do. Force available December. I've basically abandoned Northern Malaya. This is how I'm defending it. I have brought all my aircraft back to Singapore. I have got 4 air bases on Singapore. That's plenty enough space for dispersion. I can build some hardened encampments, all sorts of things. Those other air bases around, I'm going to do things with them, but they're there. But I've got hopping around the country to keep up reconnaissance and make sure the airfields look like they're in use. I've got the 24 Lockheed Hudsons. But there again have all their stores and everything based down on Singapore. So the entire air group is based on Singapore. Now, whilst this isn't a massive air group, this is the sort of air group which Malta would have killed for, as I've said. So honestly, this would be quite good. And if you've got a mass formation of able to put up about 41 torpedo bombers, that's 36 Vickers Wildebeest and 5 Fairey Albacores combined. And if, honestly, you might not be able to have all of them available, but let's say you could probably mount a decent stack from those 41 aircraft of about 25 to 30. That's a fairly large hitting force should you need it. And if you can have them go in at night, even better. And you've got 30 Hurricanes now coming to join you, hopefully. So if you have those come and join you, and you've got 60 Brewster Buffaloes, you've now got 90 fighters. Okay, yes, you're not going to be able to drive off amassed air attacks, but the Japanese are a long way away. There are still issues. You're going to have to do things about worry about the airfields in Malaysia, but I've got some plans for that. But that's a significant fighter force to defend you, and you can disperse them around your 4 airfields. So, in my mind, each airfield was going to get a squadron of Brewster Buffaloes, and 3 of those airfields would get a squadron of Hurricanes. Because that way I would have the stores and everything spread about for them, and they'd be more survivable. The forces. Instead of allowing Phillips to amass his forces at Singapore, where he would feel duty-bound to go and deal with anything in Malaysia, I've had him as my senior naval officer, my fleet commander, to amass forces, including the 2 R-class battleships, at Ceylon. He's now got 3 battleships, a battlecruiser. The 8 older light cruisers are currently on convoy escorts, but they're under orders that the moment that war begins with Japan, they are to congregate on Ceylon, along with the 11 destroyers, which are, again, some of them are on convoy duty, but again, they will all the convoys will be left with sloops. I'm sorry, they're going to have to be. And the light cruisers and destroyers will concentrate on Ceylon with Phillips. At Singapore, I have 3 heavy cruisers and a modern light cruiser operating out of there. Their purposes are to keep as far away from Singapore as possible, actually. Whilst they're operating from Singapore and under my command, they are more operating as a sort of, as far if they can keep round as far away around in the more the South China Sea and other areas, keep away so the Japanese hopefully don't see them, but then get in the back of their formations and start causing trouble behind us. So basically make the Japan, instead of charging and attacking Japanese forces head on, I want to be causing trouble behind them, so they start to have to think, oh, hang on, where are the British? Where are the British? Where are the cruisers? Where are the British? Where are the British? We need to do something about them. There are cruisers behind us. There are cruisers. That's what I want them thinking. So I want to take the pace out of them, especially if you consider where their fleet is attacking Pacific in the Pearl Harbor. That's where their major fleet is, and the Native forces are here. They're only going to be locally strong around certain points. They're not going to have as many ships available. So if your cruisers are out there as individual cruisers doing surface radar actions, you're going to cause them a nightmare, especially as we all know the Japanese don't have that much in the way of convoy defenses. So now, again, as Supreme Commander, I give myself a little bit of latitude. Instead of Otis and Proteus going in August and November, as Supreme Commander, I persuaded the lovely Churchill and Curtin that I needed to keep my fricking submarines. So I have 6 submarines and 6 torpedo boats, which are the main naval defense around Singapore. I've got my sloops. I've got about 4 of them have been out mine laying probably, but they'll be doing all sorts of mines will have been being laid. And remember, I have been doing mine laying since April. So there are plenty of mines laid around me now. Please bring your naval forces straight to Singapore. I will be so happy to say hello to them. And here's the thing. If I manage to hold back my naval force at Ceylon until January, which I can do under my plans, because they're not, the army is pulling back onto lines of defense, and we know that. So therefore, the urge of the Navy to charge in is going to be a case of restrained by Roger Keyes, because he'll be going, no, you hold back till we have enough force. I get another battleship, and I get an aircraft carrier, maybe. And this is the thing. If I am very, very nice, I might even get Formidable out early. Yes, it's a bit difficult because she's technically, her and Illustrious are both in repairs and also get out there as quick as possible. But there is a Supreme Commander yelling for aircraft carriers. And you never know, I might also get the Americans or someone else to send their aircraft carriers along, because they might consider if we can secure Singapore and start a fleet operation for Singapore, then we can defend the Philippines and Australia and all the other things. And that's the other thing. As Supreme Commander with this defense, I'm going to be calling up MacArthur and going, you know what? Do you have a spare brigade or 2 to strengthen my forces? Because if we can hold them at Singapore, they're not going to come down to the Philippines. That's the thing. If you can hold Singapore, you're safer. But more importantly, there are other light cruisers that come out. There are 2 modern light cruisers that come out. There are more destroyers. There's another submarine. Well, hey! So, the thing is, if I can hold the naval forces back till January, and then January they come to Singapore, when probably at this point, in the nicest way, the Japanese, especially if I'm holding up and everything's holding, the Japanese might well be considering sending significant naval forces down to me. suddenly you've got the troops that might be besieging those lines of defense, which I talked about earlier, suddenly see 4 battleships, a battle cruiser, an aircraft carrier, a dozen cruisers. Light cruisers, but a dozen cruisers. Maybe some of the heavy cruisers as well join in. And these other ships managed to get called in. 15 destroyers, so that's pretty much 2 flotillas of destroyers almost, coming in together in formation. A huge armada. Maybe they're even bringing some more reserves from India. Who knows? But you have this massive force arriving. If I am the Japanese officers at the Royal Navy, I'm going to report back, the British are here. It's a sort of psychological image, because, you know, we are besieging the British, but a huge frigging fleet has just sailed in. And they are massive, and they are belching fire at us. You know, this is the point. It's just going to be, wah! Right. Set a plan. I have nicked the plan from one of the greatest generals of all times, Arthur Wellesley, Duke of Wellington, the lines of Torre Vedras. You may have a larger army, but I will make your life. So, there are reconnaissance aircraft out there, and there are bombers hitting you at night. And that's what I want. I want the bombers hitting you at night. So, you won't be getting much sleep in your attacking advance. Okay, that's my plan. That's another reason why I want light forces retreating in front of you. I want them also trained to radio in your positions so that at night, boom, 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 boom. Yes, I know they're not as accurate. Yes, I know the chances of them actually hitting anything are slim to none. But if they get dropping bombs in the general vicinity of you, that is going to ruin your sleep. And it's all about wearing the Japanese down and psychologically sapping their energy. This is why I'm doing the run and the hit and run. They withdraw to these lines. Basically, the defensive area becomes critical in Malaya. The Indian Ocean reinforcements concentrate on Ceylon and come from Ceylon. It takes 8 days less than 8 days at cruising speeds. We're talking 12 to 13 knots. So if they need to come quicker, they can come a lot quicker. But if they can come at cruising speed, they can come at cruising speed. You know? The entire thing is we've prepared defensive positions. Then it doesn't matter how good your troops are in jungle warfare. They're not going to get through. If I've got my troops properly supported, if I've got reaction units which can respond, if I've managed to retain my troops in good enough order with good enough command structures that they can work, and most importantly, if I've managed to give those troops confidence in their defensive positions. If they've got nice defensive positions, they go into them and go, we're in this. They've got to come here. And oh yes, the lines in front of us the area in front of us is scorched earth. There are no trees, nothing. It has been burnt down. And before you start saying the British wouldn't do this, okay, I agree. Sir Percival and others wouldn't. They wouldn't order the firing on palaces of senior leaders, etc., when the Japanese were using the headquarters and all these things. They wouldn't. Roger Keyes would. Roger Keyes would have been about winning, and he would do the scorched earth. We'll deal with the rest of the problem later. We will do it now. Right, so the likely result. All things being equal, the probability is the Japanese logistics stretches as before. It really does stretch. But instead of them finding a routing force, they're tired, they're heavy, and they come across these lines. And they are well manned. The troops still have their morale. And yes, they might not be the best troops in the world, but they don't need to be the best troops in the world when they've got strong enough positions to defend upon, and they can be cycled back returned in so they can top up their morale. And basically, if it's a prepared defensive position, it takes a lot of effort to crack it. And yes, I might not have a lot of heavy artillery, but I've concentrated all my artillery. I've concentrated all my aircraft in one space, so I can call them when I need them. I have concentrated all my tanks. I've concentrated everything. So you haven't been taking out my heavy equipment as I've been coming south. You haven't been causing me to lose command structures. You haven't caused me to lose a whole load of personnel. And I've managed to use that time to strengthen my positions. And if the Japanese fleet decides to come to interfere, then that's even better, because the Royal Navy will come in. I can call them. If I hear the Japanese fleet, if my Catalina's detect the Japanese fleet coming, you can guarantee the Royal Navy fleet's going to be coming, and they're going to hit my submarines. And I'm going to have probably the Americans and the Australian and other forces coming up from the south as well. So the Japanese will get caught in a very nice, very interesting sandwich within range of my land-based torpedo bombers, which will be an extra addition of fun. So, I hope you enjoyed it. That's my plan for how I defend it, basically. But I haven't been able to do any computer simulations or anything like that, or tabletop exercises. I have literally just worked this out in my head. So you know, it's. I'm sure everyone have good comments. I enjoy good, positive comments. If anyone wants to rip it completely to shreds, please don't. I'm more a sea commander than a land commander, but I do think this would have worked. I just think it's a lot of things that the personalities involved wouldn't have done because of who they were, which is why I ended up going, right, and how do I change this and realistically change it? And the realistic change was Sir Roger Keyes. Again, I do not know what happened to the cruiser in Back Pocket Cruisers, but I'm looking so forward to that. What would you put in warehouse at the end of World War I for World War II? And Back Pocket Cruisers. It's going to be a good week, good month. From the sea. Korea, Indonesian confrontation. Basically, it's going to be how sea forces have influenced and helped out with land campaigns. In Korea, it's basically all about how do we just knock out trains. Or actually, that becomes the Royal Canadian Navy's tribal class destroyers. Their favorite song in Korea becomes, it's all about the trains, about the trains, about the trains, no bombing. It's all about the trains, about the trains, no bombing. It's all about the trains. Sorry, I will stop singing. And what do you think of the new camera, by the way? I'm still working it out quite perfectly. It's supposed to have its own digital zoom and things, and that works sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't seem to like with XSplit, but it does work most of the time. I think there's some software things I need to add in. Anyway, so it's Twitter at AC Naval History. Hey. Naval History Live, Patreon, my book fund. Thank you very much to all my lovely patrons. Thank you very much to everyone, basically, as I said in the other video. Thank you very, very much, because without you, I wouldn't have any of these fun things. And Global Maritime History. Well, hey, it's a very cool history system. It's basically maritime history very broadly conceived. So if it can make any tenet of a link, it goes for it. And, well, I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm going to finish not here, but here. So these are the criteria I used, and I hope I kept to them. I did try to the whole way through. And I hope you've enjoyed it. This was me. I was challenged by one of my listeners to consider how I would refight the Battle of Malaya, because I made some comments about Force Z and how I thought it would be deployed. And frankly, I can rail about these people all I like. I can, in the nicest way, my experience with Tom Phillips is that he's not really my favorite naval commander. Some of the stuff he comes up with is pretty silly. But saying that, he does have the makings of a good officer. It's just he's put in an impossible position. And the thing is, he isn't senior enough or politically strong enough to be able to go, no, I don't want to be there. Roger Keyes could have turned around to Churchill and gone, where do you want me to put my ships? No, sorry, they're going there. They'll get to sing. He probably told Churchill, they're waiting on the carrier. They're going to turn up in force. It's got to turn up in full fleet. It's got to be a perfect start. He would have he would have managed upwards as well as downwards. And that is the thing. You need something. It needs to also be believable. And I said, so I hope you enjoyed it. And good Lord. It's going to be over an hour's worth of videos for introductions alone. Enjoy.